Hi everyone and welcome to the Galactic Collaboration Summit. My name is Brett Lonsdale and I'm the captain of a company called Lightning Tools, which is an ISV over in England. I'm also an Office Apps and Services Microsoft MVP, and you can get in touch with me on Twitter with my Twitter handle of @BrettLonsdale. So we're going to be talking about modern sites, modern lists, and modern web parts. And one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this today is because there's still many people there out in the real world, back on planet Earth, that are using classic sites, and I guess are slow to be adopting the modern experience of Microsoft SharePoint. So what I want to do is just take a look at some of the new modern features or some of the more recent features, and we'll explore those and see how we can use those within inside of SharePoint and also Microsoft Teams in order to build a solution. So once again, my name is Brett Lonsdale, Microsoft Office Apps and Services MVP. I'm the Fleet Admiral or Captain of Lightning Tools, and also a new company as well called Enlightening. And so later on this summer, there'll be a little bit more news around Enlightening, and you'll be able to find out a little bit more about that on enlightening.tech.com. I'm also a host of TechSplaining.net, which is a podcast with a number of other MVPs, such as Mark Rackley, Stephanie Donoghue, and also Rob Foster. So if you want to check that out, head over to TechSplaining.net, and we look forward to speaking to you there. Okay, so what's on the agenda? Well, first of all, we're going to look at building the hub sites and associated sites for the Galaxy. And inside the Galaxy, of course, we've got several different quadrants, and we're going to be focusing on the Beta quadrant and also the Delta quadrant as well. And of course, this is where the Borg is and also the Klingon Empire. So we're going to build a hub with some associated sites that allow communication to take place between these different quadrants, and we can perform some aggregation from each of these different associated sites and bring that content into the hub so that all of the information can be found in one single place. We're also going to take a look at how we can join a hub. So if we were to build a new quadrants or associated sites such as Gamma or Alpha, then we could join the Galactic Hub simply now from the SharePoint user interface. And I'll show you how to do that using the site information panel. We'll also take a quick look at how the permissions are handled within the hub, and of course, look at some of the web parts that support hubs and associated sites, such as the sites web part. We're then going to jump into the modern lists and libraries. So we'll certainly compare how they look and feel compared to the classic lists and libraries that you may be used to. And I'll show you some of the new features that we've got in there. And if you were at the Collaboration Summit, I think a couple of years ago now, you'll have seen that I did a session on the new feature of conditional formatting. And I want to show you how that has evolved to what it is today. You can actually do a lot more conditional formatting without using code. So I'll show you how we can perform that inside the user interface, and also show you a brand new lists feature that was announced at Microsoft Build this week that I'm recording this webinar. We'll also take a look at the custom forms and how we can basically take the modern responsive forms and use Microsoft Power Apps in order to add a little bit more logic and perhaps change the layout of some of those forms. And I'll show you how that works with the new property pane. And like I say, we'll maintain that responsive layout as we're doing that. We'll also look at how we can share files and sharing links. And really, this is highlighting some caution of some of the things that your users may do if they have edit permissions, and just to be cautious about how you perhaps govern the way that those sharing links are shared inside your organization. And then to wrap up this session, we're going to also take a look at a few other modern web parts. So beyond the sites web part, we'll take a look at the highlighted content web part, the file viewer, and we'll look at how we can connect some of these web parts together as well using the new SPFX client-side web part connections. So let's jump in. And like I say, first of all, we're going to take a look at hub sites and associated sites and how that really compares with what you may have been used to inside the classic interface of Microsoft SharePoint, or if you've recently moved or planning to move from SharePoint on premises where you've got traditional site collections. I want to introduce to you the hub sites and associated sites. So these were announced quite some time ago now, and at first when we were to create a hub, this required doing quite a bit of PowerShell to register the hub, and of course we would join the hub as well for an associated site using PowerShell as well. Now it can all be done using the SharePoint UI. We can go through and register a hub using the SharePoint admin experience, and we can go and associate a site actually within inside the modern site itself. So we'll go through and I'll demonstrate how some of this is actually achieved. So over on the left, we've got a classic site collection. And if you're familiar with that, then basically we go through and we create our first site, the root site within inside that site collection. And of course, we can go through and create subsites, such as subsite 1, subsite 2, subsite 3, 4, and 5. And of course, each of these sites contain lists and libraries and so on, which I'm sure you're already aware. But some of the challenges that we had was, first of all, knowing where to navigate. So if there was a particular list or something that we wanted to access, or maybe a document, and it was residing right down there in subsite 5, the way that we would navigate, we're never going to remember that URL in order to go straight to subsite 5. So we were kind of responsible for creating our own navigation or maintaining our own links in order to jump straight to the content that we wanted to work with. The other challenge here was permissions. And when we had a site collection like this, quite often permission inheritance would be broken between some of these sites, and permissions just became a real mess, where we may have broken the permission inheritance, but we didn't clean up the groups that we had originally inherited from a parent site, and therefore we didn't realize that when we were adding users into groups or sharing levels such as subsite 1 or subsite 2, that those users were still actually getting permissions to subsite 3 and 4 because they were being added to groups that were still within inside the access control list for subsite 3 and subsite 4. So we ended up with a whole bunch of different SharePoint groups showing inside that site collection. It just became messy on how we could go through and manage all of that. So the way that this is sort of transitioned is the fact that we've got this now flat hierarchy. So we can end up with different sites created, and they all live within inside the sites managed path. They're all their own site collections. You can, of course, still create a subsite if you want to, but it's kind of discouraged. So we can go through and create these sites and then associate them back with a hub. And the benefit of doing that is you're still maintaining your own security levels at each of the associated sites, but also you get this consistent theme going through, so we can apply a style at the hub that bleeds through to all of the associated sites and provides that uniformity for your users when they're going from one associated site to another. And the other benefit is we've got things like consistent navigation and so on throughout the hub. So let's move on and take a look at how we can go through and actually register a hub within inside of SharePoint. So we can go into the SharePoint admin panel. So as we go to the SharePoint admin center, you'll be able to navigate to the active sites. And within inside the active sites, we can select a newly created site. And from this hub drop-down menu here, we can go through and choose the register as hub site. And we're going to provide it with a name, such as the Galactic Core Hub. And we can then go through and specify who can actually associate their site with our hub. So of course we don't want anybody joining our hub, so we can go through and specify those users that will be able to without actually entering any sort of approval. So that is then registered as hub. So when we go through to another site, such as the Delta Quadrant site here, what I can do is bring up the site information panel, and I'll show you this inside the demonstration, and we can basically go through and select a hub that we wish to join. And once we've done that, we can select save, and that's it. The site that was once a standalone site has now joined a hub, and we'll be able to navigate through to it, and it will inherit the theme design of the hub site to provide that consistent look and feel. Okay, so let's take a look at how we go through and actually create a site and also associate it with a hub as well. So to do that, we're going to jump into SharePoint. And as you can see, we've got our Galactic Core Hub here, and I've also got the Delta Quadrant that has been created, and I've got the Beta Quadrant as well. So what we'll do, first of all, is create a new site, and we're going to select the team site, and we're going to call this the Gamma Quadrant. So that is, of course, unique. We'll go through and select next. And finish. And we've got our new Gamma Quadrant site. So the next step would be to go through and join this to the hub. So up in the top right hand corner here, we'll select the cog icon, come down to site information, and under the site information, we have this hub site association. So in the drop down here, we can go through and choose the Galactic Core Hub and click save. And that is it. The Gamma Quadrant site will now belong to the hub, and we'll be able to consume any content back to the hub, such as the news, and also use things like the highlighted content web part in order to bring that content in. So working with the modern lists and libraries, the modern document library, you've got the ability to add things like conditional formatting. You've got a much more improved responsive experience when you go through and edit the properties for each of these documents. And also you've got other things that occur when you hover over people's names and things like that. So you can actually go through and view the profile and recently visited documents and that type of thing. So the side panel, as we go through and access a modern document library, you'll see that we can select a document, and over on the right hand side here, we'll have the property panel appearing. So we can actually preview what that document looks like inside the property panel. We can see who has access to that document as well, and we can also go through and see the properties and even edit those properties all within inside that panel on the right hand side there. And you'll also notice some of the other improvements to this, such as the data bars that we can add and other types of conditional formatting that you can build into your modern SharePoint lists and libraries. So the other thing we can do is go into Power Apps to customize some of these forms. So if we were to edit the properties, such as the mission years and maybe the title of the document as well, we can use Power Apps from within inside the document library to launch the Power Apps interface. We can make the customizations to our forms and then just simply publish that back to SharePoint, and we've got a brand new forms experience, which is perhaps being able to add a little bit better flow and layouts and logic to some of your custom forms, not just for document libraries but also for other SharePoint lists as well. Now, this is also taking another evolution that was announced just this week at Microsoft Build, so the virtual conference, and that is that Microsoft Lists is actually becoming its own entity. So what you'll notice on the left-hand side in the top left-hand corner is the waffle menu, and under the waffle menu you can see that we've got this new Microsoft Lists with a capital L. And the Microsoft Lists with a capital L, if you think about it, we had that same challenge with the site collections, where we had to navigate through lots of different sites in order to get to the site that we wanted to work with. Well, now we're not navigating those sites in order to find a list either. We can actually go and see all of our lists directly using the waffle menu. They're still housed within inside of SharePoint, but they're just accessed a lot more easily. And also we've got some brand new templates being created as well. So you see in here, we've got things like the new high checklist, and we've got business trip approvals, social media calendars, and that type of thing that can be created as a bundle or also as a shared list. They also share some of the same conditional formatting capabilities that I'm going to show you inside the modern libraries in just a moment. But also you get other improvements such as inline editing of this library whilst maintaining that sort of rich experience with all of the conditional formatting. And you also get the ability to do things like comment on list items. So in the same way that we can maybe add comments to documents, such as comments inside of Microsoft Excel and comments inside of Word, etc., we can go ahead and do the same sort of thing with inside a list item as well. So if you want to find out a little bit more, I can't demonstrate the new modern lists because it's not in my tenant yet, but if you scan the QR code in the bottom left-hand corner, that will take you to an excellent video where you'll be able to see a good tour of the new modern lists. Sharing links has also changed. So one of the challenges that I always found within document libraries was the several steps that you had to get through to actually get to the permissions management page, and it actually took about 5 or 6 clicks in order to get there. And if you can imagine that if you've got users that have maybe left the organization, and we know for a fact that we've got folders and files that have been shared and therefore they have unique permissions, broken permission inheritance, it would take a long time in order to be able to find whether that user actually had access to these documents uniquely or not, and would of course have to go through and tidy those permissions up. So one of the new or newish improvements is the fact that we've got sharing links now. And there's 4 different choices, and these can be enabled or disabled from within inside the SharePoint admin experience. So one of the things we can do, which you should use caution on, is actually allow sharing for anybody with the link. And if we were to select that or enable it, it actually becomes the default. So when a user goes to share a link with somebody, the default will be the anyone with a link, and they will actually have editing capabilities. They'll have contribute permissions to that item, as well as that item ending up with broken permission inheritance. So keeping that switched off, unless you really need it, we can go through and share with specific people, which will still break the permission inheritance, or what's useful is actually to share with people that already have access. So if they just perhaps don't know where a document is, or you've created a new document, you want to share that and bring it to their attention, then you can use the new sharing links experience to actually go through and share a document with people that already have access to it, and therefore you're not breaking any of the permission inheritance across any of those files. Okay, so let's have a look at what we can do with these modern lists and libraries. So again, we're going to just Alt-Tab into our SharePoint experience. We're going to go to the Galactic Core Hub, and inside the Galactic Core Hub, I've got a document library with just a handful of documents in here. Over on the left here, this is where we can go through and share. So if we wanted to generate a sharing link, we can basically go through and select how we want to share that. So sharing it with specific people, we can select this option, click onto apply, and then basically enter their details. And we can copy the link and send it to them, or we can send that straight away through Microsoft Outlook. And from here, you also get the ability to manage the access as well, which we can also do by simply hovering over that ellipsis and choosing see details. So over on the right hand side, when we see the details, I can see who has access, and I can basically drill into that to see the people that have access to it. I can stop sharing it as well from here if I have enabled a sharing link. And at the bottom, we've also got some of the properties. So in here, we've got the name of the file, the title, and then I've also got the mission years as well, which I can go through and edit straight away. So if we wanted to put the value of 10 in there, we can actually write that back to the document immediately from this side panel. So the forms that we were talking about that you may want to edit with Microsoft Power Apps was the edit all link here. So I can choose the edit all link, and that will bring up the property pane as well. So using Power Apps, we can actually go through and add some different fields on here, or maybe you want to add some color formatting or just change the layout or something like that. And like I say, maintaining that modern responsive experience as well whilst we do so. So let's take a look at how we can go through and actually customize some of this stuff. So if we wanted to go through and add some conditional formatting to the mission years, what I can do is just click the drop down here, and as well as conditional formatting, I can just simply come down and add a total as well. So maybe I want to have an average of how many years these missions are taking. So that's really straightforward to go through and add at the bottom of that library there. And as we go into the column settings, we can also choose the format this column option. And on the format this column option, you'll notice that we've got some conditional formatting, which we can go through and turn on. So no need to actually use JSON unless you really want to. So you can go into the advanced mode there and really get involved in adding some of your own conditional formatting, or you can just simply use the UI. So you can go through and add a rule. So in here we can say is, if we wanted to know about those longer missions that are greater than 7 years, then we could go through and highlight that. So we've got this sort of pale blue, which hopefully you can see on your screen. So if we wanted to make that a bit darker or something, we could go through and highlight that content. And basically we're making that content stand out. What we'll do is just change this to data bars instead, and you can see here immediately, without having to do anything, it's worked out the values inside that column and built some data bars, which I can also go through and customize. So again, if I don't like that color, we can actually go through and change those colors for something else. So we've got various colors here that we can go through and select from and display within inside that library. So The other thing we could do, like I said, is customize these forms. So to customize the forms, we can basically come into Power Apps, and under Power Apps, we've got the customize forms option. So this will launch the Power Apps experience. We've now got our panel displayed in here. So we've got the title, modified date, and mission years. Actually go through and choose add a field, so you can see a number of other fields that we've got. So I'm going to add the created and created by to my fields, to my form as well, and we'll take the mission years, and I want that to stand out a little bit. So what we'll do here is just go through and change the color slightly so that that's highlighted. So we can maybe go for something a little bit bolder than that. There we go. So we've changed the color of that. There's other custom colors, of course, that you can go through and apply, like a lovely purple. Okay, so once we're happy with the form design, we just hit back to SharePoint, save and publish our changes. So now that we've published that, if we go through and select a document and bring up the details and edit those properties, you'll see how we've now got that purple border and we've got the created and the created by. So really quick and easy to go through and add that level of formatting to your forms. So the other thing I want to show you is how we can go through and access a list or library with the modeling experience inside of Microsoft Teams. So what I'm going to do here is actually go through and access a page that I created earlier. So that page is called Important Files. And on my Important Files page, I've already set a lovely purple background. I'm just going to come in here and edit this page. And in the left-hand side here, we're going to go through and add the document library. So I'll go through and select the document library, and we can choose which document library we want to work with. And notice how that conditional formatting and everything else that we've set has come through. So I'll republish this for the moment, and we'll take the URL. What we're going to do is jump into Microsoft Teams, and we've already teamified this site, and you can do that, as you'll notice, with the Gamma Quadrant site that you saw me create. When we create the site, we can also create a team at the same time. So that's exactly what I did in order to get the Galactic Core Hub here. And on the general channel, we can go through and add a tab. So there's a number of different tabs that we may see that we've added to the app catalog here, or we've also got some of the out-of-the-box ones like SharePoint. So as I choose SharePoint, this gives me a number of different pages that I can access, as well as a number of different lists. So I'm going to choose that Important Files page, and we'll just hit save on that. And there's the page, and we can see the modern library experience, and users will be able to use that just as though they were using Microsoft SharePoint. Okay, so let's go back to the slides. And so one of the modern web parts that we've got is known as the highlighted content web part. And again, if you're coming from a sort of classic SharePoint experience, you may be familiar with things like the content query web part or the content by search web part, and how they were actually involving quite a bit of time and effort to make them look nice, but also to be able to aggregate across different sites and different site collections. And of course, with this hub and associated site experience where there are all different site collections, that's quite important that we do have this ability to aggregate across different site collections. So the highlighted content web part, we can go through and add on any modern page. It's really easy to configure. We can go through and select different sites that are maybe frequent sites or recent sites, and we can add different levels of filters and sorting capabilities. And we can also sort by not just ascending or descending order, but based on the most viewed and how things are trending and things like that as well. And we've also got different types of views that we can actually display. So rather than just a traditional list, we can go through and add a grid or a carousel or something like that as the experience. And we've also got web part connections that we can explore too. So we're going to add to our Galactic Core important information page with a couple of other web parts, one of them being a file viewer and also a list properties web part. And we're going to use web part connections, which was recently introduced with the SharePoint framework. So we can go through and add that to some custom web parts as well if we wanted to build our own connection interface. So we'll go and take a look at some of these web parts. So let's just Alt-Tab back out. And so on this important files page, we will do this though inside of SharePoint. So on the page, we're going to go into Edit again. And on the Edit page, over on the right-hand side here, we're going to go through and select a file viewer. So as we search, we can select the file viewer web part. And the file viewer web part, it immediately opens up this view of where we can go through and select different documents that we may want to view. So if we want to sort of set that in stone as to which file we want to view, that could be quite useful for something like a brochure or marketing slides or something like that that we want to show inside the site permanently. But actually what I'm going to do is just come down here and click cancel. And we'll choose the web part properties so we can edit the web part in the top left hand corner here. And you'll notice that again, we've got that opportunity to add a file, or we can click on the ellipsis in the top right hand corner. As I select that, I can go through and choose the connect to source. And this allows me to go through and select my library or documents web part as the source. So that's all we need to do. So that's now connected. So our file viewer is now connected to the document library. So as I go through and select a file, notice how we now get this nice preview where you can actually jump through and display the different PowerPoint slides, or if we went to select, say, a Word document, we can go through and browse the Word document as well. So very quick and easy experience to add to those document libraries to save you even one more step of opening up that property pane. And we can also go through and add another web part here as well, which is the list properties web part. So as I drop that in, notice again, you've got the option to connect, a little bit more obvious this time. So we can either do that using the ellipsis at the top or just hit that connect button. And we can then go through and connect that to the same selected item from the document library. And there's some auto size properties, and you can choose which fields you want to display, allow the users to edit the items and things like that, which is something you can turn on or turn off. So not only do we now get the preview of the file, but as we go through and select that file, we also get the properties in there as well that we can go through and edit if we want to. And what I'm also going to do here is just go back to the Galactic Core Hub and make the navigation a little bit more obvious. So as I click onto Edit on this homepage, I'm just going to come in here and sneak in between these two web parts, the news and the activity. And in here, we're going to go through and add the sites web part. So we'll go through and select that. So the sites web part is there. And notice I didn't have to do anything with that. It's already returning the associated sites to this hub. So we've got our gamma quadrant already, as well as the beta quadrant and the delta quadrant. Okay, and one more web part that we will take a look at is also the highlighted content web part. So inside two of these associated sites under delta quadrant, if we navigate here into the site contents, you'll see that I've got a contacts list called Borg. So we can go in there and we can see some of the different contacts that belong to the delta. And we've got the same sort of thing going on here within the beta as well. So we can go through and access the Klingons. So we've got a Klingons list in there. So maybe I want to bring this content all into one place. So we'll add that also to this view. So we can go through and select the highlighted content web part that we mentioned earlier. And notice it defaults to showing the most recent documents within the hub. So that will automatically include any associated sites as well. But what we can do here is just bring in the web part properties, and where the data source is currently set to all sites in the hub and selecting the document library, I'm just simply going to change that to the contacts lists. And as we select that, we've now got our Klingons and also Borg coming through into one view that we can access from the hub. And this gives me the opportunity to go through and sort. We can have maybe a carousel or a film strip, or also a list of those contacts, and basically go through and republish that page. And very quickly indeed, we've got this nice single view of all of those contacts in one place. Okay, so I hope you found that tour of some of the more modern type web parts and more modern lists and libraries experience useful. If you do have any questions, then of course you can reach out to me. My email address is brett@lightningtools.com, so feel free to reach out to me there. or also I'm Brett Lonsdale on Twitter. And you can also visit our blog as well. That is lightningtools.com/blog. Okay, many thanks.
Thank you for being a part of the Galactic Collaboration Summit. Join the community and meet in-person world-class Microsoft and MVP speakers this autumn in Wiesbaden, Frankfurt, Germany, with 15 full-day tutorials and over 150 Microsoft 365 and Azure sessions at the combined European Collaboration Summit and European Cloud Summit from 26 to 28 October 2020. Community rocks.